Hello and welcome to CBC Arts Exhibitionist, the show that goes from coast to coast to coast to give you an inside peek into the inspiring world of Canadian art. I'm your host, Amanda Paris. On today's episode, we'll go behind the scenes of a Filipina sketch comedy collective. We'll meet an artist who fuses visual art and dance to tell a powerful story. We'll learn how 3 artists tackle colonialism through their work in our latest Art 101 lesson. And we'll meet the tattoo artist connecting to her roots with a magical character. Get ready to laugh, learn, and be inspired, because this is CBC Arts Exhibitionist. When I was growing up, I was taught to call every older woman auntie as a sign of respect. As you can imagine, I had many aunties. Some were bossy, others were funny, and many frequently offered me life advice, whether I asked for it or not. Our CBC Arts correspondent, April Aliermo, is taking us behind the scenes of the Tita Collective, a musical sketch comedy troupe inspired by the quirks and personalities of the Titas in Filipina communities. Take a look.
Even though my mom, my aunts, and my grandmothers are hilarious in their own ways, I don't usually equate comedy with Filipina women. I came across the Tita Collective, a performance troupe of Filipinx women who do comedy, and I wondered, who are they? What do they do? What kind of jokes do they tell? Why? I'm so excited that we get to sit in on one of the rehearsals to find out more.
So we were all hanging out one day, and then we were kind of all joking about how we were all becoming titas. And a tita for us is just like an older woman in our family. A lot of these titas always have like mannerisms of, oh, just eat, 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 keep eating.
Kumain ka na, which means have you eaten? Often titas will be like, kumain ka na, and then follow it up with, you've gained weight. Now that I'm older, I realize like that's their way of being like, hey, are you well? Are you fed? Can I take care of you in some way?
And we said, why? Why do people not like being titas? Titas should be praised.
We chose comedy as a medium to tell these specific stories because we found comedy is a really accessible way.
And so we took on the name Tita Collective.
But when boys break your heart, that is when the eating starts. So don't worry, Tita Ginger is going to make your favorite dish. Sige. With what I make, heartbreak, Kare-Kare. Heartbreak,
Kare-Kare is a peanut butter-based Filipino stew, and my mom makes a killer Kare-Kare, and Heartbreak Kare-Kare is hilarious.
Or mothers can be kind of strict, but that's the only way they show their love. And they don't mean to be strict, that's just how it comes across. I wanted to focus on that aspect of titas, how there is that loneliness, but it's only because they came here by themselves. You know, they came here pretty young.
You can't go. Why not? Mom, stop saying my whole name.
I'm at the age where my mom had already had me at this point. Putting ourselves in our moms and titas' shoes, it's like you're not that different from us.
At the end of the day, I want you to be alone.
It's scary. It's scary because now it's us. You know, when you start talking about yourselves, you get a little like, oh, I'm so vulnerable. And that's how it feels every time we put it up. We feel vulnerable.
There are people who have seen our show and were like, oh, I didn't feel like I was made fun of. I felt represented.
I feel a lot of joy, and I feel it a lot in my heart whenever I sing these songs. Having that empathy for my mom, it's allowed me to really relate to her and see the world through her eyes.
When the Philippine community sees that, they see how happy we are, and that kind of, we get them talking about these issues through laughter.
Hi, I'm Agathe Bray-Bourret and I'm from Montreal. I'm an illustrator and an animator. I do hand-drawn animations, mostly with water-based medium. My characters are loose and lazy, and my art evokes nostalgia, lightness, and is mostly silly, and hopefully funny. You are about to see some of my gifts. Take a look.
Coming up, Professor Lise is here to lecture us about 3 artists who tackle colonialism through their work. The history of colonialism, a history that is still ongoing, by the way, is one that has literally shaped our modern world. The occupation, manipulation, and exploitation of countries, regions, and communities has shaped everything, from the language we speak to the food that we eat. It's no wonder that it's become a space of exploration for so many artists. Here is Professor Lise to break down a few examples of how artists challenge colonialism through their art.
I'm Professor Lise, not really a professor, and this is Art 101, not really a class. We're here to go on a deep dive of an idea, an artwork, or a story from the art world that's controversial, inexplicable, or just plain weird.
And today on Art 101, we're going to talk about what happens when artists use the tools of colonialism to push back against their colonizers. This is a lady wearing a batik dress and shooting cherry blossoms out of a gun. It's by a British artist named Yinka Shonibare, CBE. That means Commander of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire. What do the dress and the gun mean? Both are souvenirs of colonialism. Yinka Shonibare was born in London, raised in Nigeria, and he moved back to England when he went to art school. In a lot of his works, you'll see people dressed in these batik fabrics. These are patterns that people have often considered as generally African. Why do we think that? Because the history of colonialism is insidious and has often given us some bad intel. But Shonibare is pointing at the actual history of the fabric, which is not actually African at all. It was inspired by designs in Dutch Indonesia, produced in England, and then sold back to West African colonized lands. And by the 1960s, it had become not only known as an African-looking fabric, it was actually considered a symbol of African independence and culture by Africans. By inserting this into his sculptures, Shonibare uses his art to wake us up to some of the things we don't know about colonialism, and to challenge some of the things we think we do. Canada has its own long history of colonialism, and Kent Monkman, a Canadian painter of mixed Cree and Irish heritage, has taken on this history using a language we might be familiar with: massive paintings that usually feature political, biblical, or historical events. You know the kind. They might depict the French Revolution or a raft lost at sea. Monkman turns this genre on its head in the most disturbing ways, like in The Scoop, his painting from 2018. The colors and the arrangement of figures mimic the huge paintings we're used to seeing. But what's actually happening on the canvas is something much more terrible: the kidnapping of Indigenous children from their parents and their homes, to be taken to residential school where they were cut off from their language, their culture, and their families. And by making this work, Kent Monkman uses a form of painting that's usually state-sanctioned and that usually celebrates colonial triumph to expose the evil reality of colonialism. Brian Youngins, another artist who's used unusual methods to point to the history of colonialism, commodification, and culture. His sculptures look like intricate masks from the northwest coast of Canada. They have faces, eyes, even real hair. But closer up, you'll find out that his warriors are actually made out of Nike Air Jordans.
Youngin says that his art fights against the trap of racial pigeonholing, while it makes reference to racism, cultural stereotypes, and even the sweatshops in which mass-market products often get made. One of the best services art can do is take a simple idea and make it nuanced, or make a complicated idea something we can get our minds around, or our feelings. Remember Picasso? His Les Demoiselles d'Avignon from 1907 was based on a series of Iberian masks he saw at a museum. Picasso's love of them was part of a pretty insidious way of seeing art of other cultures, African, Asian, Near Eastern, as primitive, made by people who were less connected to technology and more connected to nature, sexuality, even violence. This way that many white Europeans saw the cultures they were busy colonizing made its way into all kinds of art before and after Picasso. And because part of the way we learn about culture is from art, ideas of primitivism or about myths of other cultures sort of sneakily made their way into the minds of generations of art viewers. Art is a trickstery little game that way. So Youngin, Shonabare, Monkman, these artists all make works that question narratives of colonialism, racism, and misunderstanding or appropriation of other cultures. And by doing so, they give us a chance to change how we take in and how we question history. See you next time for more Art 101.
Thanks, Professor Lise. The Aswang is a shape-shifting and flesh-eating vampire who has inspired multiple books, movies, and myths. At least that's what she became after colonialism. She was originally described as a strong shaman, which may be why she's become a character that has captured the imagination of tattoo artist Marigold Santos. In this edition of our digital series, Art Hurts, we hang out with Marigold and learn how the Aswang has helped her to reconnect to her Filipinx roots.
It's sometimes kind of creepy being in this elevator alone at night.
When I started tattooing, a lot of people were really excited because they know me as a visual artist who usually makes very big paintings, like large-scale paintings in galleries. Most recently, I've included tattooing as part of my practice because it's just a continuation of making an image, making a mark. When I started tattooing, the images really just started to come out in the same vein as my drawings did. In most cases, people don't know what their tattoo is gonna look like until they get here. Simone is a midwife who's coming in for a tattoo. The image that Simone chose is one of the classic Aswang figures that I do. So it's a shrouded Aswang. The Aswang is a character in Filipino folklore that I've reconfigured to talk about contemporary issues of selfhood and multiplicity and fragmentation, all of these concepts that I work with in my art practice. The Aswang is a character from Filipino folklore that I grew up learning about and knowing about. She's a feared creature, and she's inherently multiple because she has the ability to self-sever, meaning that she discards her lower half in the nighttime and her upper half flies around, hunting and doing some pretty gruesome things, only for her to join her lower half by the end of the night, otherwise she dies fragmented. The reason why the Aswang is such an important character for me as well is because knowing that I was born in another country and immigrated to Canada has always created a little bit of a dissonance for me with my identity. And I really relate to both cultures so well that sometimes I find myself really embracing where they overlap. I got my first tattoo when I was 18, but I wasn't ever really interested in being the person to give tattoos. I really just appreciated getting them for myself. And it was a very personal thing for me. I would set the day aside, and that was the one thing I was gonna do that day, which was give the gift of a tattoo for myself for that day. It's really important for me to have Julie, who is a fellow Canadian Filipina, tattoo me and share her practice with me. And because she is a healer, I was really looking forward to the spiritual aspect Being tattooed by Julie was incredibly special to me because she tattooed my hand. My right hand is my tool that I use to bring my images to life. It is a symbol of my ancestry and my heritage.
Oh my goodness, it's absolutely beautiful.
I do love the process so much, and it's so exciting. Every single tattoo yields a new learning experience because every single person has different skin and different ways of expressing themselves. So the intimacy that we share through the tattooing process is really an incredible and special experience for me. I recommend people getting bigger tattoos as their first tattoo. If you're ever gonna have just one tattoo, it should be a powerful one. And maybe making it super teeny tiny diminishes that a little bit. But again, I'm not gonna tell you how to party.
Coming up, we meet the artist who is bringing 2D prints to life in powerful ways. The Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, aka NSCAD, has an incredible reputation. Their lithography workshop was hugely popular in the 70s, and many famous artists went to make prints there. Recently, NSCAD called on 8 artists to continue the workshop's legacy. Fernandes was one of them. He decided to use his work in visual art and dance to create a print and choreography that tells a powerful and tragic story. Take a look.
As an artist, I work between the intersection of visual arts and dance. This, opposition of encounter of these two fields is something that I play with. My work is always about a lived experience. My family immigrated from Kenya to Canada in 1989. And this sort of idea of working and finding a place of home has always been a question for me. So this sort of idea of identities, who am I, is a question that is constantly played in my work, not just through cultural identity, but also as a queer, a person who identifies, outside of the peripheries. My subcultural identities through punk rock music or ballet, how do I mix all of these things together? Because these are the things that make me who I am. As an artist, I think that identity is constantly in an action. I'm looking at the dance floor as a space of agency, as a space of freedom. Dance becomes an index for a release. In my print, the dancers are taking specific positions. Arabesque isn't a position, it's more of a gesture or a motion or a movement, and it's sort of seen as the othered position. Arabesque meaning Arab-like. And in the time that these positions were being created, the Arab was this sort of Orientalist, this idea of being othered. And so I play with that in this, to kind of use the dancer's body in Arabesque to take on, motif. So within the print, you'll see 49 bodies of repeating dancers. 49 has a significance to me because it looks back at the Orlando massacre, where people went to dance in the nightclub. People of color, queers of color, fell to the dance floor and didn't get up again. I've always been interested in the NSCAD archive, the legacy of the conceptual history. I was really struck by the Solowit prints. Because in my work, I'm thinking about directives and ways to make performances through language. And Solowit's prints, have this really tiny sort of directive that instructs how to make the print or how the print was made. Using a black crayon, put 50 small dots at random over the surface of the stone. Then connect each dot with a straight line. Print the result in 4 colors: yellow, black, red, and blue. by turning the stone a quarter turn for each color. The Solowit print definitely for me was a prompt. These sort of drawings, these sort of patterns were ways that, the court of Louis XIV drew things to make a sense of a movement. So I've taken one of these floor patterns, these beautiful filigrees, and we've rotated it 4 times. So it almost for me is a metaphor for the chaos in nightclub, or the kind of idea of this sort of free body moving. The kind of cinematic, glamorized fallen body in the Busby Berkeley film. And then that mandala is shifted. So it's almost like creating an animation of space where this body is seemingly look like it's moving, or it's flat on the piece of paper, so it looks like it's fallen. In the Orlando massacre, 49 people who were dancing fell to the floor and did not get up again. So if you look carefully into the work, there is this embedded tally in the filigree of the notation that references back to the bodies that fell in Orlando.
We've actually partnered with NASCAD to profile each of the 8 artists participating in the lithography workshop. We'll be rolling their stories out weekly on our website, so make sure to check them out. If you have an artist that you think should be on CBC Arts Exhibitionist, send me a message on social media. Our handle is @CBC Arts. Tune in next week where we'll be doing another deep dive into the invigorating work of Canadian artists. Peace.